Let's talk about ChatGPT and teaching accounting, the threats and opportunities. So we're not going to talk about artificial intelligence in general and how artificial intelligence will change the world. Let's keep things basic here. We're talking about teaching accounting at the college and university level. That's our discussion topic for today. Some key points. Background. What is ChatGPT? And I should stop right here. This is a snapshot in time. This is August 2023. Things will be different a year from now. But for now, this is the discussion. And by the way, the news is good. For teaching accounting, ChatGPT is not a major threat, not a threat that we haven't dealt with many years in the past with students collaborating with one another on homework. So this is not a new threat. Now, that's not to say that things aren't going to change in the future, but I think we'll be able to see here directions that suggest that teaching accounting is not going to be threatened by ChatGPT or anything like unto it. Now, other fields, yeah, there are threats, but for us teaching accounting, we're okay. So the key points: background. What is ChatGPT? Who owns it? What are people saying about it? How's it going to change the world? We'll look at some actual examples of ChatGPT responses, which are quite interesting. We'll look at some systematic research that has been done in looking at how does ChatGPT do in answering the questions about teaching accounting, the homework questions, sample homework questions. And then once we've laid the groundwork, let's talk about what should we do. We'll see ways to write questions carefully so that right now ChatGPT really doesn't do a very good job at answering those accounting questions. We'll discuss a little bit more broadly, how should we be assigning grades in a ChatGPT world? Can you use, in terms of opportunities, can you use ChatGPT as a tutor? I'll show you one simple example, but that's an interesting possibility, a tool to use in helping us teach accounting. We'll talk about enriching the classroom briefly, and then we'll talk about enriching assignments. And I'll introduce you to my brother, who will show us a very interesting project a simulation created by Stu Kent, experts in creating simulations that show how we can use projects to teach accounting better and not threatened at all by ChatGPT. So let's go ahead and get started. First, what is ChatGPT? Well, when in doubt, ask ChatGPT. Hey, that's it. What is ChatGPT? I ask it. It said, and I'm not saying I understand this, but let's see what it said. ChatGPT is a large language model developed by OpenAI. We'll talk about that organization in just a minute. It's based on GPT 3.5 architecture. There's now a GPT 4. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But it stands for, if you wonder what the GPT stands for, Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Okay, great. I don't know what that means, but that's what it stands for. It looks through it's a program, a computer program looks through vast amounts of text data. Now it says it's a large language model. All right, what's a large language? I asked ChatGPT, what's a large language model? It's a type of artificial intelligence designed to process and generate human language to communicate with people like you and me. It's called large because it has an extensive number of parameters or trainable weights. Stop right there. See, I can read this, but I'm not sure I know what it understands. So let's bring it down to the level where at least I can understand it, and that level is football. So if you follow, I'm not saying you should do this, but if you ever follow a sporting contest online, I use ESPN.com. That's not an advertisement, but I use ESPN.com throughout the game. That will tell you what's the probability after every single play. What's the probability that this team will win? What's the probability that that team will win? So let me give you an example. This is Super Bowl 51, and I apologize to those of you who are Atlanta Falcons fans. I know this is painful, but we'll use this as an example. So it was 2nd down and 2 at the Atlanta 35-yard line. With 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the score was New England 12, Atlanta 28. So the ESPN.com display said there's a 99.6% chance that at that point in time, the Atlanta Falcons were going to win the game. Well, where does this percentage come from? And it changes throughout the game. Where does that percentage come from? Well, there's a vast database of details of games played. A vast database. And so what the program does, this artificial intelligence, going back to the large language model, there are parameters or trainable weights. And what this database does is say, let's identify the important things that determine the outcome of a game. First, what's the score? Who's ahead? Where's the game being played? How much time is left? What's the down and distance? Of what's the weather like? All those things that people who follow football have said those are important things in determining who will win and who will lose a football game. So there are trainable weights, and you run a bunch of data through this artificial intelligence model that underlies this probability of prediction for these football games, and it says, okay, based on what we know, past experience, there's a 99.6% chance that the Atlanta Falcons will win this game, given the current circumstances that we've fed in. Some things we don't put in. What did the stock market do yesterday? Well, that's not relevant here. Only the relevant things, the parameters are relevant to this problem. So how could these data be used, for example, to improve coaching? This, by the way, I'm asking a very controversial question. What a coach could do is use this model and say, okay, given these circumstances, what happens to my probability of winning if I do this on the next play, if I run the ball, if I do this on the next play, pass the ball, and if I pass it in what way? So use the database to analyze the change in win probability based on different calls. This is very controversial use in basketball, baseball in particular, football, but train the model and say, under these circumstances, what happens to your win probability if you do a certain play? This particular painful example for Atlanta Falcons fans of they ran the ball 2nd and 2. They only got 1 yard, so now it's 3rd and 1. And they decide instead of running the ball again, they decide to pass the ball. The ball was fumbled. The quarterback was sacked. The ball was fumbled, and the momentum of the game changed dramatically. But this kind of model can be trained. Look at all the data, look at the relevant parameters, and decide how can you call your football plays better. That's an example, a simple example of what ChatGPT here calls a large language model that can be trained based on the things that are determined to be important. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. So let's ask ChatGPT a little bit more. It has 175 billion parameters, these trainable weights. Again, in the football game, it's what's the score? How much time is left on the game? Who has the ball? What are the weather conditions? Well, in ChatGPT, there are 175 billion of those kind of things. And the next generation of GPT models, GPT-4, it's said to have between 1 trillion and 100 trillion of these parameters. So it's smarter. And the data that are in ChatGPT, the free version that we can get access to now, its knowledge cuts off as it reminds you when you ask it questions many, many times. Its knowledge cuts off in September 2021. So these things are just going to get better and better and more powerful. In just a couple of years, the number of parameters have gone from 175 billion to as many as 100 trillion. Just imagine 10 years from now. It's scary, but it's kind of exciting. Now, ChatGPT 3.5 is the underlying computer program, if you will, this artificial intelligence program. That's GPT 3.5. ChatGPT is a conversational interface, so you can talk with it like it's another human being. A chat bot is what they call these, so that it can engage. You don't have to know anything about computer programming. You just ask ChatGPT, for example, what is ChatGPT? It asks that simple question, and it can converse with you. It's a chat bot. That's what ChatGPT is. That's where the chat comes from. So what are people saying about ChatGPT? Well, they're saying a lot. A very good review of this is in the MIT Technology Review, and if you can't trust MIT, whom can you trust? ChatGPT is about to revolutionize the economy, and we need to decide what it looks like. So in the resource material that accompanies this webinar, we've got a summary of this article, but go to this article. Here are some of the important questions it addresses. Will ChatGPT make the already troubling income and wealth inequality bigger? Well, generative AI like ChatGPT could help a wide swath of people gain skills to compete with those who have more education and expertise. So ChatGPT could increase income inequality. People who are in the club and use ChatGPT for various things could gain more wealth than people who are out of the club who have less wealth, but it also could bring people together. I'll give you a quick example. A few months ago, not long after I first started using ChatGPT, I got a manuscript emailed to me by my grandson, Jay. He's writing a book. Dark Art Diaries is the name of the book. And his mother, my daughter, had told him that, hey, your grandfather has been reading and writing and editing manuscripts for years. Why don't you send your book to him and let him give you some proofreading comments? So he sent it to me, and I went through the first 10 pages. It was rough. He's a 13-year-old boy, and his subject and verb don't always agree. His punctuation is kind of spotty, sentence structure. So there's a lot of work to be done in the first 10 pages. So I went through and I did it, and then I had the thought, I wonder what ChatGPT would do with my grandson's manuscript. So I just copied and pasted those 10 pages into ChatGPT, and I said the instruction, please edit this for grammar and punctuation. It took 10 seconds, if that. Beautiful, absolutely beautifully done. So I told my grandson, listen, you need to get yourself a ChatGPT account. Have your mom and dad help you get it set up, and you can run your manuscript through that, and it could really clean it up nicely. So he was a little skeptical, but he did it, and he said, it's perfect. It's perfect. And it is perfect. It cleaned up all the grammar, all the punctuation. It didn't change the meaning at all, but really made it look like so it was a finished manuscript. Here's the thing. I've been writing things for 50 years and editing things for 50 years. And so I went through those first 10 pages, and it looked pretty good when I was done with it. But my grandson doesn't need me and my 50 years of experience. He can just put his manuscript through ChatGPT directly, and he has now cleaned up his manuscript to the same degree that I, with 50 years experience, could do. So it just eliminated my advantage that I've worked to develop over 50 years. He's got the same skill now. He doesn't have it in his brain, but he's got access to it, and he knows how to use it. So ChatGPT could very well scrunch things up, give people who haven't had the advantage of a long amount of schooling and experience to have the same quality output as a person who does have that long experience. Who will control this amazing technology? It's another thing that MIT asked. And companies could decide to use ChatGPT to replace people or to enhance people and make them even more valuable. So there are lots of things, and if you want to get the view, a nice overview of the whole landscape of artificial intelligence and the potential impact of things like ChatGPT, read this MIT technology review. Who owns ChatGPT? People often ask this question. Well, there's an organization, OpenAI, which stands for Artificial Intelligence. It's a research laboratory. It was created in 2015 as a nonprofit organization. And there were contributions from a variety of people. One of them was Elon Musk. He contributed $50 million, I think is the best estimate of how much he contributed. By the way, he's pulled out of being associated with OpenAI and ChatGPT. He wrote a letter earlier this year saying that we need to slow down a little bit and think about the implications of the widespread use of artificial intelligence in the economy. But he was one of the initial contributors. A couple of years ago, OpenAI split into two pieces. OpenAI, the nonprofit that's always existed, and OpenAI Limited Partnership. We know what a limited partnership is, where you can have investors, and it's interesting. Limited partnership, the investors can earn no more than 100 times their initial investment. I'd take 100 times my initial investment, but that cap is placed on it, and any surplus, it is said, goes to the nonprofit to be used in education and advocacy work. So there's money to be made by people who invest in this limited partnership, but not an unlimited amount of money. Now, what's Microsoft's involvement? Microsoft was one of these early investors slash contributors. Plus, in January 2023, Microsoft invested an additional $10 billion in OpenAI and OpenAI LP. It's been suggested that in the end, Microsoft will own about 49% of OpenAI. It's a private organization, so all these details are just kind of estimated, but that's what I've read. Microsoft is building features of ChatGPT into their web search engine Bing. So Microsoft has an involvement here. So who owns ChatGPT? OpenAI does, and you can see a little bit of the history of the organization. Now, let's ask ChatGPT some questions. The first exposure I had to ChatGPT was from my daughter, a university student. I said, "What is this thing?" She said, "Oh, well, I've got 40 pages in a textbook that my teacher wants us to read by tomorrow." The instructor just dumped it on us. So I put the whole thing into ChatGPT and said, "Give me a 2-page summary." Boom, it happened just like that. I said, "Show me this thing." So I started tinkering with it. Here's an example query. What are the key points of the U.S. Constitution? I asked ChatGPT. There it is. There's a beautiful summary. We won't take this as a opportunity to go over the U.S. Constitution, but there's a nice summary of the United States Constitution right here, generated by ChatGPT. Now, what we should stop and ask ourselves is, okay, yeah, couldn't I do the same thing with Google? Okay, let's try that. I asked Google the same exact question. What are the key points of the U.S. Constitution? I put in a Google search. Here's how Google's response was different. Google said right at the top there about 528 million results, and then it started listing down in order the different sources: the National Archives, University of Baltimore, White House, Cliff Notes, and of course a very interesting thing is how does Google rank these choices, because it's been found, research has shown that if you're not in that first page of results that Google gives, the probability that you'll be consulted goes way down. So what Google does is says, okay, thanks for the question. Here are a bunch of sources that you could look at to explore that question. What ChatGPT does is look at all those same sources and gives a synthesized answer, usually with no original sources unless you ask for the original sources. So thinking from the standpoint of a university instructor, Google's a great resource because it tells the student, okay, here's are the sources that you should look at. You should read all this and then synthesize your thoughts and write a report, write a paper, write an essay. That's what Google does. ChatGPT says, hey, we'll do it for you. We've done the whole thing. So that's got interesting implications for college and university courses that ask students to do some research and write a paper. That is where instructors at the university and college level are very nervous about the existence of ChatGPT. So that's a difference between a ChatGPT answer. Here it is. I've synthesized everything I read online, and here's a nice little summary for you. Google says you go out and look at the sources yourself. By the way, sometimes ChatGPT creates fictitious sources. We'll talk more about that in a bit. That's interesting. Here's another example of a ChatGPT response. Here's the question I ask: is 17,077 a prime number? Well, this text right here is what ChatGPT generated. To determine if 17,077 is a prime number, you got to check whether it's divisible by any integer other than 1 in itself. You'd go up to the square root of 17,077. It's a perfect description. So then ChatGPT does some arithmetic, checks these divisors, and finally ends and says, as you can see, there are divisors other than 1 and 17,077, so that number is not a prime number. Well, it's great. It's beautiful. It's a very nice setup of the problem. The answer is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. For example, just this little thing right here, That arithmetic is wrong. ChatGPT has left off quite an infinite number of decimal points, and the fact that 7 and 2,439.5714 repeating are divisors of 17,077. Those aren't integer divisors. So ChatGPT hasn't really used arithmetically the definition. So this answer is wrong. Turns out that 17,077 is a prime number. Now, the reason I chose that number is some researchers from Stanford and Berkeley were looking at ChatGPT. Actually, it's next step, GPT-4, to see how stable, if there are any drift in the responses. So they looked at GPT-4, the March 2023 version, and that version was very good at identifying prime numbers, got it right almost 98% of the time. The June 2023 version got it wrong almost 98% of the time. So their point in this very interesting research paper is this is such a complex web of interactions. GPT-4 has, as I mentioned before, between 1 trillion and 10 trillion parameters. So it's impossible for a human mind to keep track of all those interconnections. So as something is changed over here, there are ripple effects, unintended consequences, if you will, over here. And some of the unintended consequences just this year is ChatGPT is no longer as good at identifying prime numbers as it used to be, at least GPT-4 is. And yet, and here's the scary thing, and something that I'm going to remind you in a minute, you've got to point out to your students, ChatGPT is so confident in an answer that is completely wrong. So let's say you were in a math class and your homework was identify whether the following numbers are prime numbers. And you say, I'm going to use ChatGPT to do this. Well, it's going to get your homework wrong, but it's going to be so confident you'll think it's right. So that's a caution that we should give our students. I'll remind us of that in just a moment. All right, so this has all been fun and games, playing around. But as my daughter was showing me ChatGPT and I was looking at a few things, I thought, I wonder if ChatGPT can answer a journal entry question. So this is exactly what I typed in. What is the journal entry to record the purchase of $4,000 of inventory for cash? All right, let's see how ChatGPT does with this question. Well, this is when I started to when my attention was really went to the next level. Here's exactly what ChatGPT said. The journal entry to record this purchase is as follows. Data kind of poked me and said, hey, you should have given me a day for the transaction, but all right, I'll put it in a place. Debit inventory, credit cash. And then an explanation, which is a beautiful explanation. You debit inventory because it's an asset, and we show increases in assets with debits. I mean, it's a perfect description. It nailed this question. Well, I called my brother, Jim, my partner, and said, hey, I found this thing. He said, okay. He said, I'm going to tinker with it. So here's the first question he asked ChatGPT. A little more difficult than mine. What's a journal entry to record the sale of equipment that costs? No, let me read exactly what he typed in. What is the journal entry to sell equipment that costs $10,000 with a current book value of $6,000 for $7,000 cash? That's exactly what he typed in. Here's the answer that ChatGPT gave. This is a screenshot. Now, you say, well, it doesn't format the thing. Okay, formatting, whatever. But in the explanation, it makes clear cash is debited because cash goes up. Accumulated depreciation this is the one where we said to ourselves, wow, ChatGPT really does know what it's doing. Because from the book value and the original cost, you got to figure out the accumulated depreciation. And then the next step that many students miss is you've got to debit that accumulated depreciation to get it off your books. Yeah, you've got to debit it to remove it from your books. The gain on sale of equipment is credited, and ChatGPT very helpfully down at the bottom says, and if it had been a loss, that would have been debited. Gains are credited, losses are debited. That's a perfect answer. So can ChatGPT answer all accounting related questions perfectly? So far it's 2 for 2. That's some samples of ChatGPT responses. Now, the reason that all college and university instructors are a little bit nervous are because of things like this. This, by the way, is not the ChatGPT that we could get access to for free online. And by the way, if you look at the resource file that we send out, we explain how you can get a ChatGPT account for free. Though the enhanced version, GPT-4, the one you got to pay to use, it's taken the SAT exam and got 93% on the verbal and 89% on the math. That's not bad. AP exams, bam, got a 5 on AP biology. I took AP biology in high school and worked my guts off to study for that exam. ChatGPT or GPT-4 got a 5 on it, which is as high as you can get. So this is, people are getting nervous. Can this artificial intelligence do anything? Is it as smart as a law student? Could it pass the bar exam? Yeah, it can, as it turns out. So a colleague of ours at Brigham Young University, David Wood, organized a huge project using several hundred accounting instructors from around the world, and he asked them, please send in your questions and answers. And in the end, he got 28,085 accounting questions and answers from exams and homework and quizzes, and he ran them through ChatGPT. He found that the data from the instructors, he found that students had got those questions right 76.7% of the time. ChatGPT just 47.4%. Okay. So ChatGPT is not perfect. It's not getting to the 93rd percentile to answer accounting questions. Now, ChatGPT does have some strengths. It's great with true-false questions. It's good with multiple choice questions. With short answer questions, David Wood and his collaborators found only 30%. It's better with topics that aren't so mathematical. So auditing. Accounting information systems. It does better on those kind of questions. So okay, I saw David Wood just last week, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, "Yeah. So for now, we don't need to be worried that ChatGPT could come in and be the star student in an accounting majors program." But he said for the future, and he has a good point. But for now, ChatGPT is not acing accounting exams and accounting quizzes. My brother, Jim Stice, has many times taught Accounting Principles 2 at Brigham Young University, Accounting 310 we call it. So he said, let me try it on my actual questions. He said, I know exactly what my students got. 79% on these pre-class homework quiz questions. And he just ran them through, put them in ChatGPT, and knew what his students had scored. ChatGPT got 54%. So, okay, maybe ChatGPT will be able to pass the class, maybe not, but it's not nailing it. And then he put in his post-class quizzes. So he gives quizzes online related to the material that they discuss in class. And the post-class quizzes, based on what was discussed in class, students got 77%, so about the same as they did on the pre-class homework problems. ChatGPT only got 35% because ChatGPT wasn't in class. So already you're kind of seeing, if you assess your students based on the things that you discuss in class, the material that you emphasize you need to discuss, ChatGPT is not going to do as well. So I guess the big message for this little portion of the discussion here is ChatGPT does not nail accounting quiz, homework, and exam questions. 50% or less is what ChatGPT is doing for now. For now, it's going to get better. It's going to learn how to do math better. But for now, it's not a crisis. So you don't have to worry about ChatGPT just doing all the homework for all your students this fall or next winter. For future years, we need to think about this a little bit. So let's continue talking about what should we do. Well, first of all, at least for now, asking your questions carefully can make it so that students use ChatGPT at their risk. So let's look at this question. Baco Show Company purchased a machine for $100,000. It's got on January 1 of year 1. It's got 10-year useful life and a $10,000 salvage value. What's the book value at the end of year 3? So that's the exact text that I copied and pasted into ChatGPT. And here's exactly what ChatGPT said. Okay, let's Compute depreciation expense is $9,000 per year. Yes, exactly right. Accumulated depreciation at the end of year 3, that's 3 years worth at $9,000 a year, that's $27,000. Book value is cost minus accumulated depreciation, $73,000. No problem. ChatGPT got this perfectly. Now, what do I mean by careful questions? Well, let's change this question into a very simple way. Don't buy it on January 1st, year 1. Buy it on, I did this, by the way, 5 times in ChatGPT. Always got the correct answer. Doesn't give exactly the same answer each time, the same text. It creates a new answer. Doesn't just copy the old one, but it got it right all 5 times. Let's change it just a little bit. Let's buy it on August 1st of year 1. That's the oldest trick in the book. I've done this a million times on a quiz and exam questions. The correct answer now is there's 2 years worth of 9,000 full years of depreciation, and then there's 5/12 of a year's worth of depreciation. That gives total depreciation of 9,000 plus whatever that amount is. Correct answer for the book value is 78,250. That's the right answer. So I copied this exact text into ChatGPT. It nailed the one before where the equipment was purchased on January 1st. Let's see how it does now. Well, its first answer was 77,500. I figured out, well, what did it do wrong? Well, it said that August 1st was 6 months out of 12. It was making a half-year assumption, I guess. Then it said 68,500, which means it was 3.5 years. So it added an extra year and a month to the life of the machine. Then it used 3 full years. It just ignored the August for it. It's given a different answer each time. By the way, I did it many, many times. This was the most common response. Just use 3 full years. 79,000 was an interesting response. It assumed that August, from August 1st till the end of the year, was 4 months instead of 5 months. August, September, October, November, December, 5 months. Same mistake that students often make. I ran this through ChatGPT 20 times. It never got the correct answer. So that simple change from buying the equipment on January, from telling students that the equipment was purchased on January 1st, ChatGPT always gets it right. Telling students that the equipment was purchased on August 1st, ChatGPT never got it right. And it got it wrong in various interesting ways. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Let's do a managerial accounting question, net present value. Let's compute net present value. Well, business project costs $200,000. It's going to have positive cash inflows of $30,000 a year at the end of each year for the next 11 years. The discount rate's 10%. What's the NPV? Well, the correct answer is negative 5,148. I ran this through ChatGPT 5 times, never got the correct answer. First said it's positive 5,860. It used 12 years instead of 11 in the computation. Go figure. Then it set it up correctly twice and said, and we're going to put this in Microsoft Excel. The NPV function didn't know how to use the NPV function correctly, so it got that wrong. It incorrectly computed the present value, even though the setup was correct. Did that same thing again. It computed it incorrectly in a different way, even though the setup was perfect with exponents and the whole bit. Never got the right answer, ever. ChatGPT is not great at arithmetic for now. A year from now, it'll be better. Right now, today, this fall 2023, it's not great at arithmetic. Let's try another question. Let's put in income taxes. Machine costs $200,000, generate before tax cash inflows of $30,000 each year at the end of 10 years. There's zero salvage value for tax purposes. The income tax rate's 30%. What's the NPV? Correct answer is negative 34,097, the impact of income taxes. ChatGPT, I did it 4 times, never got the right answer. First try, it didn't know that depreciation is a non-cash expense. It just put it in as a regular cash expense. Did the same thing again and did it the math incorrectly in a different way. in the third and fourth attempts, and it's not learning, by the way, it's just kind of doing it differently each time. The third and fourth attempts, it set it up perfectly. It said, okay, you got this 30,000 before tax cash flows, you got income taxes on that, but you got a depreciation tax shield that set it up perfectly, and then just did the math wrong in two different ways. So ChatGPT got it wrong 4 times out of 4. Now let's take it down to just some simple examples, just to show you again how ChatGPT does on accounting questions. January 1st of year 1, Twilla Company borrowed $10,000. The interest rate is 12%. What's interest expense for the year? ChatGPT, thank you. Got it. 12,000. Okay, let's change the date. March 1st, what's interest expense for the year? Well, ChatGPT got confused and just computed interest for that 1 month of March instead of for the whole year. September 1st, ChatGPT made the classic student mistake and used 3 months instead of 4 months in computing interest expense for the year. So dates in accounting problems seem to confuse ChatGPT for now every single time. Another thing, my brother and I experimented with this. Let's say I send out students a Word file with the homework questions in them, and I don't want them to use ChatGPT. A very simple thing to do is put in some of the important data as an image file. So I put this into ChatGPT, that right there, but this key piece of information, inventory amount equals 7,800, I copied it into the Word file as an image file. ChatGPT couldn't do it. So if I am an instructor worried that my students are just taking their homework, a Word file, and running it through ChatGPT and getting the answers, a very simple way to stop that is to put some of the key data in the problems in the Word file as an image file. I don't know, I didn't test, and I apologize, whether ChatGPT currently can read PDF files. I don't know that. By the way, if you do something like this, make it harder for ChatGPT to read the homework file, you need to be sensitive for your students who are sight impaired, because they have software and devices that read the text to them. So you perhaps need to make special files for them. So be sensitive to that. The point is this: careful questions today, fall 2023, can make it so students who use ChatGPT are going to get the wrong answers systematically. Put key data in as image files, change the dates so everything isn't for a full year, and ChatGPT gets it wrong every single time. Now, ChatGPT, so in accounting, I guess some broad messages. In accounting, as of today, ChatGPT doesn't do great at accounting questions. It's a bigger concern in courses for which writing and student paper is an important part of the grade. ChatGPT, or GPT-4, the next generation of the underlying GPT software, got scored in the 88th percentile in the LSAT exam, so it can get into law school. 93rd percentile on the writing portion of the SAT exam. I mentioned that earlier. 99th percentile on the GRE verbal question of the GRE. So ChatGPT currently could do a very good job at getting into graduate schools or getting into law school. A geography professor made this suggestion about mitigating student use of ChatGPT in writing papers. It's a big part of this instructor's course, the evaluation of papers. He said, just require the students to include a hyperlink to each paper that they cite as a source. ChatGPT is known to create fictitious papers using reasonable sounding titles, actual authors, actual journals. If you just look at the bibliography, you say, wow, these are great. These are good journals. I've heard of those authors. But this geography professor found that if you just require students to put in a hyperlink to each paper, you click on this and you find there's nothing there. The paper doesn't exist. So for courses where a big part of the grade is in papers, this is what this geography professor suggests. Just make the students give you hyperlinks to all their sources. You can click on a sample of those and find out quickly whether ChatGPT has just made things up. By the way, people have talked about this and said, some of the titles of the papers that ChatGPT creates are papers that haven't yet been written, but they sure would be interesting papers. So it's actually a good way to generate research ideas. I actually did that. I didn't put in these slides, but I said, ChatGPT, outline a paper, a research paper in accounting that explores the impact of earnings management. Lays out a nice 2-page outline of the kind of, it doesn't do the research, but it says, here's the kind of research that you could do. So it's a nice source of ideas. But if you're going to grade students based on papers that require sources, have them include hyperlinks. Now, don't forget, for years, we've already been dealing with unauthorized student collaboration on homework and quizzes. ChatGPT is just another way for students to engage in unauthorized collaboration. Do your homework by yourself. Well, we know that many students collaborate on assignments like that, or they find fraternity brothers sources from classes in past years and get answers from there. So that's been happening for years. So the same techniques that you've used to combat those, just view ChatGPT as another unauthorized collaborator on homework or online quizzes. And it's a notoriously unreliable collaborator. As we saw, many questions identifying prime numbers, making journal entries where the initial transaction wasn't on January 1st. ChatGPT is a particularly unreliable collaborator, and yet it answers with such confidence. So here's what I would, if I were you, that this fall, for your instructors, give this, or for your students, give this caution to your students. ChatGPT gives answers with great confidence even when it's wrong. At least in an accounting course, copying answers from ChatGPT is very risky. You could cite some of the numbers that are included in these slides. 54% for broad base of questions. For quizzes based on in-class discussion, as my brother showed, I think the number was 34%. So if you use ChatGPT to do your online quizzes and your homework, you're going to fail this class. You owe it to your students to give them that caution, because they will have heard that ChatGPT can do everything. Well, it can do a lot of things, but for now, it doesn't answer accounting questions very well. Not a reliable collaborator. Okay, so let's think about going forward when ChatGPT is improved and can identify prime numbers and can do its arithmetic a bit better. And let's say it can answer 100% of accounting questions perfectly. Well, we need to think about that world. And one thing to think about is, how do we assign grades? Do you currently put a large weight, grading weight on homework? Well, a high weight on homework, it's got good and bad. It rewards students' efforts. I remember the first accounting class, or not accounting class, the first calculus class I took at university. I was the dumbest student in the class. I had a really hard time, but I worked hard on my homework and got perfect scores on my homework, which counteracted the lower scores that I got on my exam. So the grading system there, half the weight was based on homework. That rewarded me, a student who was willing to work hard. The bad aspect is that it encourages cheating, because homework is done out of sight of the instructor. Homework is done in a setting, an online setting or a paper setting, where you can get collaboration. So one thing to think about is, how much weight do you put on homework, which is susceptible to cheating in your establishment of grading. Class participation, ChatGPT can't do that for you. Projects, we'll see an example of a project in a few minutes here. ChatGPT can't do those. Exams, well, let's talk about exams. And remember, I'll say this again, cheating, unauthorized collaboration on homework, that's nothing new. So you just need to ramp up a little bit your controls that are in place that make it so students that are tempted to cheat on homework, there'll be controls in place to prevent it from doing that. And one control is to not put so much grading weight on homework. So the relative weights. Homework, be careful about putting too much weight. It's a temptation. It's not fair to tempt your students to cheat. So think about that. Class participation, we could have a long discussion about how to do that well. Uh, Systematic evaluation. When I have a class where I grade on class participation, at the end of every class period, I jot down notes evaluating each student's class participation. I don't wait till the end of the semester. I do it after each class period to make sure I've got a record, a systematic record in real time. My brother and I had a webinar in April where we talked about engaging classroom activities that help stimulate student class participation projects. My brother and I gave a webinar. We gave a webinar on everything. We gave a webinar in June about interesting class projects, and there'll be an example that I'll refer to a little bit later about good class projects, exams, that we could have a whole long discussion about good exams. By the way, something that you might not know, but that I discovered, turns out that practice exams are among the maybe the highest value added teaching tool because that you can use, because students are focused on getting ready for that exam. So you can use a practice exam to help them review all the key points in a course, and they'll do it. They don't even get graded on it. It's just a practice exam. So high quality practice exams are a useful thing to have. Make sure your exams are error-free, appropriate, that they reflect things that you covered in class. Exam security. What about online exams? That's a whole other discussion. There are a lot of large online universities out there that have figured out how to do online exam security. Maybe some of you have used some of these online proctoring systems. If you're going to have a large amount of your grading weight on exams, which is what I do, you got to make sure that those exams are taken under controlled circumstances. Again, you're doing your students a favor. You're not tempting them beyond their ability to resist. So exam security. But we could have a whole discussion about that. Point is, in a ChatGPT world, you, an accounting instructor, should think about how you assign your grades. And if you put too much weight on homework that students can do using a ChatGPT collaborator or one of their fellow students as a collaborator, your grading system is subject to degradation. So you got to be careful. How about flipping this whole thing and say, how about using ChatGPT as a tutor? The founder of Khan Academy said ChatGPT or GPT-4, the next generation of products, underlying computer programs, artificial intelligence created by OpenAI, when it's carefully adapted to a learning environment like Khan Academy, where students are learning in a self-paced environment, has enormous potential as a tutor. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So let me just give you one simple example. This isn't a great example, but it's a simple example of how you can use ChatGPT to help teach your students. So here's a question. Here's some data: cost of goods sold, interest expense, expenses, sales, and then dividends. It's always nice to put dividends in there, which doesn't go in the computation of net income. Tax rates, 40% of income before taxes. So give this to your students, this whole thing, the question and the answer. The answer is 2,490. And here's the homework assignment that you give to your students that uses ChatGPT as a tutor. Copy this question right here, this top part, into ChatGPT. Copy this text right here. Submit it to ChatGPT and look at the answer that ChatGPT gives you and decide, is this answer right or wrong? Well, how will they know? Because I've given them the correct answer right here. Don't tell this correct answer to ChatGPT. Just tell ChatGPT the question. Is ChatGPT's answer right or wrong? And if it's wrong, look through the ChatGPT explanation, because ChatGPT always gives a nice explanation of how it computed the answer. Describe where it went wrong, and repeat this 6 times. That's your homework assignment. You're using ChatGPT kind of as a tutor. Let me show you what happens. You put in, remember the correct answer is 2,490. First answer I got when I submitted this question to ChatGPT was 2,790. Okay, there's ChatGPT's answer. Now I have to search through the detailed output that ChatGPT gives and say, where did it go wrong? Well, it went wrong in this. It did some arithmetic mistakes and it subtracted dividends. Thought dividends were an expense that go in the income statement. Okay, now I got a different wrong answer, 2,670. What happened now? Again, different wrong arithmetic and also subtracted dividends. It's useful. By the way, what we're going to see here is ChatGPT doesn't understand dividends for now. Dividends are, it almost always includes them as an expense, almost always. Third attempt, ChatGPT got it right, perfect. Fourth attempt, 2,790, well, that was the same as the first one. It made the same mistakes. 1,790, that's an interesting response. It's all perfect, but subtracted dividends. Without any tax effect. So it said dividends are an expense, but it's not a tax deductible expense. And finally, the last one, it said, no, dividends are an expense and they're tax deductible. By the time a student is done with this little example here of submitting an accounting question to ChatGPT, looking at the answer and deciding what's wrong with it, if it's wrong, that student will understand. First, they'll understand very well that dividends are not an expense and they don't go on the income statement. They'll know the difference between what's tax deductible and what's not. And they'll learn how to be careful in their computations. ChatGPT is a tutor. Again, this is a simple one that I just thought off the top of my head. ChatGPT is really smart. And if we think about this a little bit, we can think of ways to use ChatGPT as a teaching tool, as a tutor, as a TA. Okay, to enrich the classroom, well-designed in-class group activities have all kinds of benefits. And so in a ChatGPT world, it makes sense to make that time together in class more enriching. As I said, I think it was in April, my brother and I had a whole webinar where we talked about these things. And we will make some of that material open to you. You can see it, Stukent's materials, they have a recording of that webinar. But all kinds of good things can happen in a classroom, and students can't send ChatGPT to class to engage in these activities for them. They got to go themselves, and by making an enriching class, we make it so that students aren't just learning how to use artificial intelligence to answer questions for them. They're actually engaging in discussions with other human beings. In addition, well-designed out-of-class projects. I mean, there's so many, and as I mentioned before, my brother and I had a whole webinar about this. ChatGPT cannot do a well-designed project. It puts it in messy fact situations, working groups. Students get in a more realistic business environment. Just a quick mention of one that I give, not in introductory accounting, but in an intermediate level accounting class. I have students use what they learned in their finance courses and what they learned in their accounting courses in terms of interpreting financial statements. Use that knowledge, go out into the local community, look at a local business, observe their operations, and estimate how much they should pay to buy that business using market multiples, discounted cash flow analysis. It's an awesome project and it gets them out in the real world. That's something that ChatGPT can't do. So enrich your class with projects, for example. And we'll look at a project in just a moment, an amazing project. So here's the question. What threat does ChatGPT pose to teaching of accounting at colleges and universities? Let's just ask ChatGPT. So I copied that exact question into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gives a beautiful response. What threat? Well, students become dependent on AI for just basic knowledge. They don't know anything themselves. They rely on artificial intelligence. There's a reduced emphasis on practical application. which we can get around by using projects and other things. Limitations on interactive and hands-on learning. So coming to the classroom and engaging in discussions with other students. Potential misinformation or errors. This is very self-aware. ChatGPT acknowledges, hey, sometimes artificial intelligence programs like me make mistakes. And if students rely only on ChatGPT, they'll sometimes make mistakes. And then this summary from ChatGPT. Okay, this is what ChatGPT says. To mitigate these threats that I, ChatGPT, pose to you teaching accounting, it's essential for accounting educators to include the emphasis of critical thinking skills, focusing on practical application in real-world scenarios, promoting active learning strategies, and guiding students in effectively utilizing artificial intelligence tools. That's a perfect response. What threat does ChatGPT pose, and what should we as accounting instructors do? There you go. That's a very nice summary of what we should do. Now, in a separate recording, my brother will introduce you to an awesome project created by a company called Stice. They call it a SimTurnship. It's a real-life simulation. Just go look at it. It's amazing. A brief explanation. Students are taken into an online environment where they have their own business. They have a business mentor, a business advisor. They get invoices from their suppliers. They make decisions about marketing budgets and other things. And then they account for all this. They do debits and credits. They do adjusting entries. They do closing entries. They make financial statements, all with the purpose of taking these financial statements to a bank in preparation for asking for a loan. It's a beautiful simulation. It's as close as students can get to actually being a working accountant in their own business without actually doing it. And it really simulates quite well what a lot of us experienced during COVID, where we're working from home. Take a look at the video explanation that my brother Jim created for this. Now, ChatGPT and teaching accounting, threats and opportunities. Let's just review. What is it? We now know what it is. Sample of its responses. It gives some very good responses and simple accounting questions. It answers beautifully. But systematic research with ChatGPT and accounting homework quiz questions finds that students are getting 75% on questions. ChatGPT is getting 50% or lower on accounting homework. So for today, ChatGPT cannot excel in an accounting class. A year from now, 2 years from now, it'll be better. So let's think ahead and plan for that day. Ask careful questions. Maybe use image files selectively to make it so it's students will have to type in all the data. It's more trouble than it's worth to ask ChatGPT to do your homework for you. Assigning grades. Let's be careful about how much weight we put on homework. Let's not tempt students to use this unauthorized collaborator to do their homework for them. Don't put too much emphasis on homework scores in the grading. This is going to be an interesting field of study. How can we use ChatGPT in a positive way to help our students learn accounting? Enrich the classroom, and then ask students questions based on those enriched activities. ChatGPT, it wasn't in class, so it wouldn't know the answer to the interesting interactive group activities that you covered in class. Enriched assignments, for example, projects. And the interesting project that my brother is going to show to you is the SimTurnship, the accounting cycle SimTurnship created by Stice. If you have questions, email my brother, email me. We've been working together, as you can see from this picture, for over 60 years, and we love thinking about the teaching of accounting. And let me just tell you a final comment. We've looked carefully at ChatGPT. It is not a threat to us. It's no different from students collaborating with their friends in homework, so don't worry about it. But there are possibilities that we can use it to help our students teach accounting better. And I look forward to thinking about those opportunities in the future. And as my brother and I come up with good activities for using ChatGPT as a tutor, we'll forward them on to you. Best wishes.